Hi, I'm Katie and this is episode 61 of Ornamentations, and for today I have so much stitching to share with you. I'm so excited. I have been really busy and I have a lot to show for it. And in addition to that, I also have some super haul, super haul, which you're gonna love. And then I also have a new giveaway as well as the giveaway winner from the previous episode. I also have an update on the Cardinal Kin kits and then some casket progress that makes my heart sing. So winter, late fall has definitely come to Northern California. My coat has been pulled out from the closet. My seasonal allergies are in full swing. And this past weekend, I made my Christmas fruitcake for my dad so that it can age before I actually give it to him on Christmas. Fruitcakes best at 5 to 6 weeks, so you really have to make it before Thanksgiving, and that's a day that I love and hate because it's a lot of work, but at the end of it your house smells like Christmas. It smells amazing, and that I think is always the day when I start feeling the holiday spirit and the holiday stitching. So although I have largely been focused on fall, I'm now turning towards Christmas, and oh boy, am I feeling it. So we'll start today with an update on the holiday kit releases. The first of which is Cardinal Kin. As many of you may know, fully sold out. There was unprecedented demand for this. And as many of you may have seen, Paulette, the designer of Plum Street Samplers, shared my finish on her Instagram. How cool is that? It's so insanely flattering. Oh my gosh, I was just bowled over when I saw it. It's the ultimate compliment, right? For the designer to like your interpretation of their piece and want to share it. However, the downside to that was that a lot of people saw the kit after it was sold out. So demand on this has been unprecedented, but I am working on putting this back into stock. There is a wrinkle with that. So I did put together a ton of kits for the original stock run, and that exhausted the global supply of thread on 3 of these colors. There is no more to do more kits with, at least for now. We are going to have to wait for thread to be dyed, and that means the earliest this could possibly come back into stock is late winter 2024. I think the more likely date for release on this would be Christmas in July 2024. In any event, there will be more cardinals, and a lot of them I have put in a truly insane order for the restock. I'm taking a really big swing on here, and I hope, oh boy, I hope you guys really want some cardinals because I've ordered a whole lot of them, but you are going to have to wait, and I am sorry about that. There's just nothing we can do. There is no more thread. However, to be notified of that, I have started an interest list that's on my website. I will link that in the description. Enter your email address, and then you will get the first notification when these kits come back into stock. And I would ask you, if you think you're interested in Cardinal Kin, please do sign up, because that will help me gauge the interest on that and know if I need to up my order even more. It's never my intent to disappoint anyone. If you want a Cardinal Kin kit, I want you to have one. So signing up for the interest list helps me get a better read on how many of these do I need. Your email won't be used for any other purpose than to send you one email that this is coming back into stock. It won't be sold. I won't put it on my other mailing list. This is just to help me know how many cardinals do I need for the restock on this kit. So that is the fabulous Cardinal Kin. It really does sing on that blue linen, which I think really adds a lot to the finish. But in the interim, if you're loving Silk Holiday and Plum Street Samplers, I do have an alternate suggestion for you. Well, I have a couple of alternate suggestions for you But one would be my own silk conversion for this joyous season. I did this last year. This is gorgeous. I absolutely adored stitching this, as I've said more times than I can count. And the conversion for this was made public. There is one problem with this, that's the pomegranates. Those were stitched in Gobelins 2636. The color is currently inactive and there's no more of it out there. I wiped it all out with my round of Joyous Season kits. So you would need a substitute on the pomegranates. I think all the other colors on this are still available, and this is a really fabulous piece. Another Plum Street Christmassy option, of course, is also my own kit for Noah's Christmas Ark II doves. Those are still available, unlike Cardinal Ken. It's not sold out. It does still really suffer on video. I actually think it's even more beautiful than Cardinal Ken. I do also kind of tend to love subtlety, so I'm all about this. But in considering how better to show this kit off to you, because I recognize that it is suffering on video, what makes this one so special is the beautiful shimmery sparkle of the gold threads against that gray linen. That's not coming across on camera. Sparkle never really does. And then just to recap, these are the threads, the beads, and then you get the linen and the backing silk that I used on my own kit. So I've been thinking about how best to try and convey the nature of this to you. So one of the threads is Accentuate, the other is Bijoux, which is quite an unusual metallic because it's not made up of a lot of blended filaments like Accentuate or most metallics out there. It is a single flat metallic strand wrapped around an exposed core. That gives it kind of an unusual, more shimmery, glowing look than outright sparkle, and it also makes it a lot easier to stitch with because it doesn't split. You can stitch with Bijoux all day in the same way you would stitch with a regular thread, only it sparkles. It's beautiful. This is white gold glint. This is Renaissance gold. They're both favorites of mine. These are pale gold wraps that are over a black core and a white core. White gold glint is the color that is in Noah's Christmas Ark. It is also unfortunately discontinued. I bought the last of the wholesale supply that existed and I've got it in my kits. There may be some at LNS's across the country, but you won't be able to get more. The only source after that will be my own kits. So I've been thinking about ways to try and better show off Bijoux to you because it really is one of the special things about Noah's Christmas Ark. And so I started a new single motif ornament from the Monofolk embroidery pattern Through the Bitter Frost and Snow. I love this because each of these can be just taken off the pattern and stitched as an individual ornament. I've done this before and we'll see a few of my finishes in just a minute. So this is the Bijoux color from Noah's Christmas Ark on Druid Blue, the linen from Cardinal Ken. I'm about halfway through and it is just gorgeous. You're not going to see the sparkle, but you will see how striking and how much it pops off that linen. It is gorgeous. I can't wait to hang this on my tree. And that gave me another idea. I have talked about this before. I just didn't connect it to Bijoux, oddly enough. That's Modern Folk Embroidery Alternative Trees. So you could take your threads for Noah's Christmas Ark. You will have tons of extra. This is not a large ornament. And then you could use your white for the white elements on any one of these. This could just be a single ornament. It would be fabulous. And then instead of the taupe, white gold glint, and you could put it on Druid Blue or whatever ground color of linen you wanted. How fabulous would that be? When there are more than 24 hours in the day, I'm gonna have to try that myself. I also really want to do one of the Through the Bitter Frost and Snow ornaments with Renaissance gold on Wayfarer's Cloak. I think that's going to be a really popping combination. That's where I'm going to go next with this, because I have been thinking a little bit about my Christmas decorations will be going up soon. I decorate on December 1st, and I've been thinking about how I'll display my own Noah's Christmas Ark, because Cardinal Kin actually belongs to my mother. I have to give it back to her after this video so she can put it up with her own holiday decorations. But mine is going on my tree, and because my tree is just a collection of all the things I've made over the years, I kind of like to group them in colors or themes and make little stories on my tree. Does that sound weird? That probably sounds weird. So I was thinking, what does Noah's Christmas Ark go with on my tree? One answer is other ornaments that show off Bijoux. And then my other thought was my crystal doves, because sparkle, doves, ooh, those go together. And that brings me to a question. So I did not offer an original embellished wool applique ornament kit this year. This is last year's. It's Theodora. These are still available if you would like to try it. It's still a fabulous project. It comes with extensive full color PDF downloadable instructions and then everything that you need to make the kit. They are a lot of work to put together, both the kits and the instructions, which is why I didn't do one this year. I just didn't have time. But this did get me thinking about next year and the possibility of doing a crystal dove as the 2024 holiday ornament. Does that sound good? And I will warn you, the answer to that needs to be an absolutely overwhelming and enthusiastic yes in the comments, because there's a lot of development work that would go into this. This is an original pattern. However, I used all kinds of things that are either antique, vintage, or discontinued, and that I would have to find substitutes for. So a lot of work would go into making this into a kit for next year. So let me know what you think. How much do you want a crystal dove? And the answer would need to be a lot. Giving you the answers to the test in advance, guys. So anyways, those are a couple of just, I guess, unconnected thoughts about holiday. This episode is not going to be very organized. I am sorry about that. But another thing about holiday and new things is that my tutorial for my embellished ornament hanger, seen here on my Sparkle Prim Prairie Schooler Santa, the conversion and all details about the embellishments on this, including the bead border, the sparkly beard, those are all in episode 39. I'll link it in the description. This is up on my channel. I was a little out of practice because when you're doing an overhead mount, where you put your hands under the camera is really, really counterintuitive. So a lot of the actual action takes place like at the bottom of the frame. I hope I'm gonna be in better practice for the next tutorial, which I hope will be up on November 30th. And that tutorial is going to be on embellished silk wrap purl loops. I'm gonna have to think of a better name for that. But there's this really wonderful specialty thread called silk wrapped purl. And what that is it's a silk wrap around a wire core that's then been made into a coil. And that can be stretched, cut, bent, looped, couched, all kinds of great things. It's most often used in embroidery, but it occurred to me a while ago that that was also a great finishing method waiting to happen. This is my latest attempt at the technique. I'm calling this my double scallop, because on this inside row, I've got a very small size hugging a crystal bead, and then backing it, I've got a larger size and a bigger scallop. So that's the double scallop. And these are all motifs from modern folk embroidery through the Bit of Frost and Snow. That's where I was going with this. I may actually put metal pearls as my my edging treatment on this one. This is a standard size silk wrap pearl just as loop, and it's got a lightly coordinating crystal color in the middle of the loops. And then here I've used again, a very small one, but they're more scallops than tighter loops. So I'm still playing around with this. I think there are a lot of different variations you could get with this technique, and I'm trying to work my way through them to give you the most comprehensive tutorial possible. So hoping to have that up November 30th. And then the other thing that will go with that is that as part of the silk wrapped purl tutorial, I am putting together finishing packs. Those will be available on my website when the tutorial goes live. And those will have a fabulous, vibrant Christmas green silk wrap purl. This is a color exclusive to Katie Strachan Artisan Embroidery. We had it made for this tutorial. I thought it would be really fun to do this as a special holiday edging, finishing, fun thing. A coordinating color of 103 silk, so you can use that both for the finishing, and then you can use that to stitch your ornament as well if you like. So unsurprisingly, my finishes so far are all totally tonal. You could of course do a contrast edging. What an idea. Someone please do that, because God knows I love tonal too much. And then these aren't the exact beads, this is just the color. There is a perfectly coordinating crystal color, so the finishing packs that go with the tutorial will be the coordinating crystal color, the silk wrapped purl, the coordinating silk, and then the needles that you use with those. So that will be the silk wrapped purl finishing packs that go with the coming tutorial. I can't show you the beads yet because there's been a bit of delay on that. Yeah, long story. They're out for delivery today. Naturally, they didn't show up before I sat down to film because that would be too easy, right? Anyways, for the silk wrap purl tutorial, I will restock the finishing kits if there is interest. I wasn't quite sure how many to put into stock. And then I do hope to have one more Flosstube extra. I wouldn't quite call it a tutorial, but kind of tutorial adjacent, up before the end of the year, but that's TBD, and the content will be a surprise. So I hope if you're interested that you will check out one or both of the finishing tutorials. They really are quite fun and incredibly easy. One of the great things about silk wrap purl generally is that you just cut and loop, and then you can get all these great effects. So I hope you'll find that fun. I have really enjoyed trying to figure out all the different things you can do with this, and I'm certainly not done. So next assignment for me is to stitch an ornament with my beautiful green here to film my finishing tutorial with. I'll be using the materials in the finishing pack for my own tutorial. And then let's get to, my finish. So I have a fall finish. We've just been talking about a holiday, and now I guess we're gonna rewind and season a little bit. And that is carrying over a thread from the last episode, Not Forgotten Farms, Thomas. Drum roll please, I have an FFO. Tell me what you think. Ta-da! Okay, yes, I couldn't resist putting sequins on his tail because Katie's sparkle prim is a whole thing in my world. I think he actually turned out kind of great. I'm not sure if I'm just nuts. I've gotten to the point where I've spent so much time staring at this turkey and I'm not sure I see him accurately anymore. So I really am depending on you guys to tell me what you think of my finish. This is the final conversion comprising 9 different threads. I actually found it very interesting that a lot of the comments in the last episode where I asked you to tell me what you thought of his color choices were pale, muted, and you know, that's actually very accurate when you look at the piece. That's kind of the general impression. But when you look at the threads, there's so much rich color there. And that's such a fascinating color discussion, because how we see color is always formed by the things around it. And that, well, okay, I have a few points on this. I'm not exactly sure where I'm starting because I'm still mentally all thinking about holiday and trying to shift gears into fall has thrown me for a loop here. So one point I do want to make about the conversion is that the colors have been extensively tested. They all work together and can be moved into any position on this guy. So if the gray body isn't your thing, I know that was twinging a lot of people. I kept it because it's such a feature of the original chart. However, I get what you mean about that. So I do want to note that you could move either of the two browns into his body. That would actually give you a more accurate turkey. So there are two browns in the conversion. These are both very interesting. I like to call them my chameleon browns because they will take on the attributes of colors around them. It's actually quite fitting that I needed them both for this conversion. It gave me such fits that I needed my two, like, keep in my back pocket, use for anything browns. So you could quite easily stick these into Thomas's body if the gray doesn't speak to you, and I do understand why it might not, quite frankly. I did have some second thoughts about the gray myself. I frogged a considerable portion of his body since the last episode, tried out different options, and decided that the gray I had picked was the best option, at least for my vision of the pattern, which doesn't mean there can't be other visions. And I did pick a blue. It looks brighter on the stitch than it does on the spool. Again, interesting color note. So I looked at a bunch of different blues because, you know, I've already tried every color in my tray when it comes to browns, golds, reds, oranges. Why not try all the blues? This guy has been thoroughly road tested, let me tell you. And I found that you definitely needed a blue with some color in it. The more toned down blues just looked washed out. They disappeared into the gray here. But something too bright was a screamer, and it took the attention off where it needed to be, which is, to me at least, that tail. And as you might also note, I ended up changing the tips of two tails into orange because one thing that got pointed out in the comments that just kind of crystallized my thoughts, like, oh yes, that's what's wrong, is that the orange was really limited to low in the tail. There wasn't much orange in Thomas, and I thought spreading it out through the tail might bring it alive a little more. I think that helped also sequins because sequins. But a point about color and the way we see it. So I asked you in the last video to give me feedback what you thought about the colors in Thomas, and a lot of people thought that my conversion was more muted and less colorful than the original stitch, which is true, but that's actually the photograph of the original stitch. And this is, just to be perfectly clear, not a criticism of the designer. It is insanely difficult to accurately photograph anything in the textile range. I have run into this myself. I'm beating my head against a wall against it right now with Nova's Christmas Ark, so not a criticism, just an observation. That orange color, his body, his tail, that's not orange. This is the DMC. It's brown. It's a brown with a lot of red in it, but it's very definitely brown. Again, color is always relational, right? So in that vein, oh, seasonal allergies, had to sneeze. So anyways, in that vein of color being relational, I wanted to share with you some of the color descriptions from the comments. I thought this was really, really interesting because it shows how personal color is. We were all looking at the same piece roughly under the same conditions, being my video, and yet there were some interesting quirks. Toned down, muted. So this is a selection of some of the things people said specifically about the colors on Thomas in the comments. Subtle, pale and needs value contrast, pale and washed out, beautiful, rich, and muted. The pairing of rich and muted I actually thought was really interesting, because it's true that a palette can be both rich and muted, but it's not two words that people often put together. Primitive, spectacular color coat of many feathers, in contrast to pale and washed out. I mean, I find the range really interesting. This is not to put anyone who said any of these things on blast. I am legitimately really thankful for all of your responses, and I find them very interesting. Colors are similar in value and cohesive, as opposed to some people who thought the colors were similar in value and therefore lacked interest. So cohesive versus washed out. Faded and soft. So muted, pale, subtle, faded, and soft are all kind of the same description, but they all carry different implications about whether or not your description is positive or negative, right? So I thought that was a really interesting array of comments, and just for the record, I'm really grateful for all of your feedback. Thank you. And some of the comments were certainly very clarifying, as when it was pointed out how limited the orange content in his tail was. I think spreading it out improved the finish. And then just kind of on the theme of color being personal and relational, this is a great quote from Robert Louis Stevenson in a letter to a friend. I should rather like to see some patterns of unglossy. Well, I'll be hanged if I can describe this red. It's not Turkish, and it's not Roman, and it's not Indian, but it seems to partake of the two last, and yet it can't be either of them, because it ought to be able to go with vermilion. Ah, what a tangled web we weave. Anyway, with what brains you have left, choose me and send me many patterns of this exact shade. So he knows exactly what he wants to see in a red, and yet he can't describe it. That color in a nutshell, or what? I'm afraid we're gonna have a lot of start-stop in this video because I keep on needing to sneeze. I don't know what it is that's causing the allergies right now, but they are serious. Anyways, one last look at Thomas, and I would be really grateful if you could tell me in the comments what you think of this guy. Oh, one other thing about Thomas, I actually gave this to my mom for her birthday. I'm gonna insert a photo here. I gave it to her with some fabulous velvet gourds and pumpkins from the Cheswick Company. So that's an idea of how he could be displayed. He really is, I think, a very fall palette. It might be a little muted in practice, but oh yeah, see, this is actually, I like it more when I see it on video. That's quite interesting. So tell me what you think about Thomas in the comments. I would be very grateful. And then unfortunately for me, because I'm suddenly feeling holiday stitching in the worst way, when I was doing some of the last color testing on Thomas, I would take the advice of one sage commenter who told me I needed to spend some time away from this piece, set it down, and do some other things. I decided to have another fall start. Honestly, not sure if this was comfort stitching or a therapy session, but I started Stacey Nash Primitives Jack's House Pinky. I love this. I think I showed this in a recent Flosstube, and so did the Curious Crafters. And so I just started this quickly, partly as comfort stitching, because to me anything on Himalayan Fog is comfort stitching, and partly as a color experiment. I was really interested in stitching Thomas to see how some of my favorite oranges would not behave on the cloister cream, and I wanted to see if what was disturbing it was the brown content in that linen or the gray content. So I got out my other favorite gray linen, which is Himalayan Fog, and I started Jack's House Pin Keep. So I've done just about all the upper stitching. As you can see, I went for greens and oranges instead of browns. I am going to put a brown in there for the roof of the house. And then I am going to change this left sleeve out back to orange. I was just kind of testing like what should be green, what should be orange. And then I am going to put in the house. I have actually really enjoyed that. I don't know if that's because there hasn't been any back and forth on color choices. This is the conversion, and honestly I have enjoyed it so much that I am thinking about adding it to the kit schedule for next year. So let me know what you think of Jack's House's Pin Keep. And I'm happy to report that all of my favorite colors behaved perfectly well on Himalayan Fog. So it wasn't the gray, it was the brown that was causing color, brown in the linen, sorry, I should say, that was causing the problems on Thomas. So that's Jack's House Pin Keep. I am gonna knock the house out and have a finish on this for the next episode to share with you, whether that's a kit or not. I did add colors to the conversions, so the original Jack's House only has 3. I managed to double that to a full 6 because I wanted to shade my greens while bringing green into the pattern instead of all brown. And then I also wanted to shade the oranges. I used a slightly darker one for the jack-o'-lanterns, and that was just too intense on the leaves, so I brought in a slightly lighter orange. But again, like I said, I can't tell if I just like found that really comforting because it was so well behaved on a color perspective. But let me know what you thought about that. And then that brings me to, we're gonna do giveaways early because it's connected to what I've just shown you. And for today, I do have questions as the entry into the giveaway. So my questions for you today, please answer at least one of these to enter, preferably all. If you don't have opinions, you don't have to answer, it's fine. Grabbing my giveaway, sorry. And the questions are, what do you think of Thomas? Does Jack's House go on the kit schedule for next year? So that would just be as like the fall tiny treasure. And then last question, how much do you want a crystal dove as an ornament kit for next year? And like I said, answer has got to be a lot. And the giveaway that I am offering as an inducement to answer my questions today is linen gradient. So these are all remnants from my personal stash. These are linens that I've used extensively in my kits. As a result, I have tons of extra in all kinds of weird sizes, more than I can use myself, so I'd like to share it with you. And I chose these particular ones because they form a really nice little gradient, all of which is pretty great for stitching at this time of year. And the first 2 pieces are Himalayan Fog, one of my all-time favorite linens. So one slightly larger, and then this is very definitely just like a little remnant cut that could be used for a couple of ornaments, nothing large. Himalayan Fog is just beautiful. It makes colors look beautiful with no effort. That's why it's my comfort stitching. Second linen, Cloister Cream. I thought I had another piece of this in here. Oh, guess not. Okay, so I've got 2 quite small pieces of Cloister Cream. This is the linen for Thomas. It's a heathered linen, so the warp and the weft are 2 different colors. These are all 38 count, by the way, legacy linen. And this is always the linen of choice for Katie's sparkle prim. So if you admired my Prairie Schooler Santa, that was on Cloister Cream. And then our darkest in the gray is Wayfarer's Cloak, which is what I'll be using as the ground linen for my Renaissance Gold Bijoux ornaments. why I had that on gray. It's also the ground linen for the Elizabethan Valentine and Queen Anne's pin pillow, so I've got a lot of it. So there's a good ornament size, or really small piece around here, and then also something a little larger. You could work maybe a small sampler on that, but it's not a huge piece. So these are all remnants from my personal stash, but they're very usable sizes, and they make a fabulous little gray gradient. So the keyword for my little gradient of linen is linen, because oh boy, am I inventive with my keywords or what? And to enter it, my giveaway, use the keyword linen and then answer at least one of the 3 questions that I asked you. And if you've got opinions on all 3, lay it on me, please, and tell me what you actually think. I did really appreciate how honest people were about Tanis. It helped me gain a little perspective on a stitch that had been causing me a lot of trouble. In the end, I think I'm really happy with how he turned out. I mean, I just imagine him strutting in. He's got his big sequined tail like a diva, like walking in her fur coat, all like, oh, look at me, I'm fabulous. So that's Thomas strutting in. But the conversion definitely gave me fits, and that's not the first time it's happened. Like, something can give you a lot of trouble and still come right in the end. But I did really appreciate seeing him through all of your eyes, reading what you had to say, and I think it helped me gain a little clarity and some perspective on my own stitch. And then on the last giveaway, I just had it here. Oh my gosh. Oh, you know, this is one of those weeks. There is stuff everywhere here and I can't find it. It's here somewhere. The giveaway from the last episode was a pack of crystals. Oh, here we go. Pack of crystals with which to make this specific ornament hanger. The keyword was crystal, and the winner is Stitching Cat. I have commented on your comment. Please send me your mailing address and I will get your crystals in the mail to you stat so you can get ahead to embellishing the ornament of your choice. Congratulations. So let's get back to holiday stitching for a hot minute and talk about plans, because those are my plans. I'm gonna finish Jack's house, but I'm really looking forward to a holiday, and as soon as I finish Jack's house, which should be pretty soon, there's not much left to do on that. It's a pretty quick, fun, easy stitch. And I have cut the linen, so this is 45 count Hazy Summit. It's the higher count equivalent of my favorite Legacy Linen 38 count Himalayan Fog. And I'm going to do Stacey Nash's Deck the Halls pin cape. I loved her Good Witch pin cape. I loved with that bow added to the lady, so you knew I had to do the Christmas equivalent. I wanted to go on my tree and be small and tiny, so I chose 45 count. I'm going to stitch this in Surfine. I think these are the colors, but I want to actually stitch just them to make sure. So hopefully next time I'll have a conversion to share with you. And I've been thinking about the finish. So at first I had thought that I would do crystal pendants, but in green for an ornament hanger. But I was also thinking maybe I'll do my own silk wrap pearl edging, because this would go great with that green bow. So I don't know, we'll see. I think this should be a pretty quick and fun stitch. So that'll be my first stitch of the holiday season, aside from my little Bijoux rounds, which, ooh, fun. I love holiday stitching and holiday decorating. Truly my favorite stitching time of year. So big smile, super excitement. And then those are my immediate radar plans. We'll get to haul in a second, but before that, I just wanted to share my progress with you on my big whip, which is Modern Folk Embroidery, AKGIT 1833 on 5363 Legacy Linen Sicilian Marzipan, and I have done the 2 round medallions at the bottom since I saw you last. The letters that go around them, I added just a couple more letters up there by that lozenge, and then I finished that second tree of life, which, oh boy, let me tell you, not my favorite, because that just has all those tiny little groups of 3 and 4 and 5 stitches making up the center line of that tree of life, and that was slow going. Not my favorite. I powered through on the end of that last night, and I have to say I'm not sad to see the back of that one. So I may just get lost in holiday stitching. I would kind of not like to lose momentum on this entirely, so I will try and keep going on AKGAT, but I'm going to add one more round medallion at the bottom. Those are kind of my eating my vegetables work and some of the letters around it before moving up to the next diamond lozenge, because those I really, well, the one I have stitched so far, I have really enjoyed. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that. So that'll be my reward for doing another of the small medallions, which I don't like nearly as much. So that's AKGIT. Still looking fabulous, still tons of work, still not that close to a finish. I'm definitely through 12 full pages. I'm somewhere on page 13, but because the small motifs bleed onto different pages, it's a little harder to like quite clearly know exactly where you are. So that's out of 20. Still a ways to go, projecting to finish sometime in 2024. But with that, let's get to haul, because oh boy do I have haul. I have some really exciting haul actually. And the first is new Legacy Linen color. Ooh. Meet Smoke Signals. And this is, ooh, getting real washed out in here. That's a little better. So this is a medium value brown gray, which is just how I like my linens. It's got some of the same undertones on close to cream that were not very nice with my oranges, but are lovely with everything else. So as long as I don't have to put too much orange on it, I assume be okay. But I cannot wait to get started with this. And I pulled a couple charts. This came in right before I made my fruitcake and got all hepped up on holiday scents. So my original thoughts on this were actually fall. So Plum Street Samplers Autumn Fractor. Gosh, of course I picked stuff with oranges in it right after saying won't behave with orange. I don't know, maybe that's a cloister cream specific thing. Friends of the Heart. I'm on a real Plum Street kick lately. And then I also thought Stacey Nash Butternut House Pinkeep, that the rich ground might really add something to that. I do really like the challenge of trying to stitch on ground with more color in it, because if you can get it right, the rewards are immense. So this is Smoke Signal. I bought a yard, don't judge me. And it's available, I think any LNS can order this, but I know that the Attic and Needle in a Haystack do currently have this in stock if you'd like some of your own. So I will probably cut into this and start something before I see you next. And that leads me to my next haul, which were, I got a delivery from Not Forgotten Farms. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Wow, of some charts and patterns I had ordered. First, ooh, this would actually go really well on Smoke Signal too. So this is a super cute little stitchy drum called Bobbin' Along. Yeah. Guess I know what I'm doing next spring. And then I got a couple of their punch needle patterns because I don't do punch needle myself, but the thing is the patterns can be used exactly as they are for embellished wool applique, which I do. There's no requirement for how you use the pattern pieces. You can do whatever you want with them. And the first was, oh, I'm gonna have to take this out. Give me a minute. First was native corn necklace. I thought that that could be made very sparkle prim embellished wool applique, not as a necklace, but as fillers for double and displayed with Thomas. Add some sequins, add some fabulousness, add some Bijoux. I didn't get around to that this year because I had so much trouble picking the colors on Thomas, but you never know. Next year, maybe. I'll have to put that with my fall charts. I think, you know, because embellished wool applique is really quite quick, it can be a great way to fill out a display. And to that wit, I also got turkey in the corn. Oh, and this was another point I meant to make about color and it being relational. So our ideas about color are also driven by what we expect to see or not see, and a lot of people commented that they thought a turkey should be more colorful. I actually went and looked at pictures of real wild turkeys when I was in the middle of my Thomas mess trying to get some alternative inspiration because I felt like I was lost, and then was greeted with a whole bunch of gray and brown. If you've never looked at a picture of what a turkey looks at in the wild, they're really drab, ugly birds. This is a still prettier version of a turkey. I really like how she draws things. They have a lot of character, and this would be really fun as embellished wool applique, maybe even on a satin ground because sparkle prim's my thing. But that I thought was a really fun turkey, and I could have some fun with that. So those might be things I add to a fall display for next year, or I don't know, maybe they just go in wild because I always have more ideas than I have hours in the day. And then I also got a Christmas chart that I've been looking at forever, and that was Parson Brown. In the meadow we can build a snowman. And that brought to mind something I already had in stash, which was Heartstring Sampler, Baby It's Cold Outside. Maybe I connect these two because they're both Christmas song lyrics, but they also look like visual design friends to me. So I thought for holiday this year I would stitch them both and display them together, and my thought was actually that I'd do one of them on smoke signals and one of them on cloister cream so that the linens go together as well. So I'll have to look at the stitch counts and figure out which is which, but that's also definitely a holiday plan. And then my last bit of cross stitchy haul was a new bead organizer and some more pendants. So the crystal ones I already had, but it occurred to me when I was filming my own embellished ornament hanger tutorial that my own pendants were all clear, and that for all of the Christmas stitching I was planning on doing, I might like to have some more Christmassy colors. So I bought some fabulous red and green crystals. So expect to see some more fun stuff from me on the embellishment and holiday stitching angle as we move forward. And with that, I am going to clear all of this away, and we're going to talk about casket stitching for a hot minute. Okay, casket stitching. So the shipping after the holiday kit launches was just such a rush, and then after I got through it all, I decided to reward myself by sitting down and giving a little time to my casket. So this is my progress on the left side of my current casket. If you are new to my Flosstube and you have no idea what I'm talking about, We've discussed the design and the start of this casket on a few previous episodes, and I'll link that in the description so you know what I'm trying to do here, what the theme of this project is. And then the last time I showed you this piece, I had done a little stitching on the French knot mounds in the central cartouche, just the side ones. Since then I have finished the center mound, which is padded. This is going to be hard to see. There you go. So the back mounds are just worked French knots directly on the silk satin. The front one, to bring it forward, which is really hard to see on video because it has this flattening effect, it's just maddening, is over felt padding that raises them off the ground. And then I also used a slightly softer thread to give the French knots a slightly different texture. That's the kind of nuance that you really only see in person and that the camera is not going to pick up. I also added the berries to the tree that the bird will be sitting on it. I wanted to bring a little of the blue into this panel just to kind of give me a color touch point as I move forward. But most of my efforts have been here on the carnation, and this is a really interesting color effect in terms of how light interacts with color, because the detached green elements here, that's gilt silk twist, this looks really dark on camera in here right now. I'm facing directly into a wall of windows. The lights are very bright and intense. This is not usually what it looks like under daylight conditions. This tends to be more what I see in evening conditions. In daylight, this green tends to be much more mellow and to flow quite fluidly into the lighter green understitching. So I did all of the flat silk understitching on the carnation. That's long and short stitch. I have absolutely loved how the petals have turned out. The way that those pinks have blended into each other just makes my heart sing. The way they interact with the greens, I absolutely love that. And if that appeals to you, that actually forms a good deal of the instruction on Queen Anne's pin pillow, which is about how to make this fabulous object. And there are still spaces remaining in the class. All information will be in the description. But effective silk shading, how to blend one color smoothly into another, is something that a lot of stitchers struggle with, and therefore how I do it and how I recommend doing it is a good part of the substance of the instructions on this pin pillow. It's my hope that every person who takes this class will be able to do effective silk shading by the time that they're done, and that this flower would be the kind of thing you could apply those skills to. I would also note that all three of those pinks are also in the kit for the pin pillow. They're deployed differently here, but the same pinks and the same technique. So this is the kind of thing that you could stitch yourself after completing the class. Not the needle lace though, that's not covered. So then the sepal for the carnation is again, padded over felt, and that's very fine needle lace. It's so fine that I think the camera is actually going to struggle with it. I did the needle lace in Surfine over a gilt return, so that's that little hint of gold you're getting as a very, very fine gold thread through the center of the needle lace. And then that just added just a little tiny bit of texture, sparkle, and depth to the layering of greens. So unlike the petals, which are three pinks shaded together, every green element on the carnation is single shade, and then I'm trying to layer those colors together. That will be what gives the shading and depth, as opposed to blending colors in an individual element as I've done with the petals. Oh, and as I was going to say on the petals, my original vision for the carnation was that I was going to do this gigantic double spray of petals in needle lace that would fully cover the silk shading under stitching. However, I love that shading so much. I'm really reluctant to just cover it up. So at this point, I think I'm actually just going to do a short inner row of petals and needle lace. I mean, that definitely needs some texture. I didn't separate, layer, or pad out any of the petals because that wasn't my intention in doing that. But I'd like to see some of it, so I think I'm going to just do, as I said, the single shorter inner row of needle lace petals in a very open stitch. So you will still see plenty of that really luminous, gorgeously pink understitching. Okay, that's giving you a little better view of the way that the greens are supposed to blend, or the way that they look when I'm looking at them. Interesting. Light obviously really affects how you perceive color, and that green combination is super harsh there, but those are the detached elements, so you can get a feel of how those stand off the fabric, and those will provide additional texture every place on this panel where I do detached elements. So in all honesty, I don't know how much time I'm going to have for my casket over the next couple of months, but the things I would like to do next would be to stitch in the tree around the bird to give a little more context to the cartouche, and I'd like to get started on the understitching for the pansy here before I proceed further with the carnation. I want the flanking flowers to be balanced in terms of how much texture, how much gold, and so that means before I go further on this one, I want to get some of its counterpart on this side going. So we'll see. And then the other way my idea about this panel has evolved is that I love that color combination so much. I'm thinking the frieze, which I haven't designed yet, may be quite flat. The frieze may be an exercise in silk shading and scrolling flowers lightly highlighted with gold, as opposed to something a little more traditional, which was what I was originally kind of toying with. I haven't designed the friezes yet, so that's still a big question mark in my mind. But that's my progress, such as it is on my casket. That is actually a lot of hours of stitching, and yet you can talk through it quite quickly. So the other thing I would note is that I am doing what I did with my last panels on the Britomart casket, which I am photographing this at every step so that when I have a complete panel, I can clip those photos together into a video and you can watch this panel grow stitch by stitch. And I hope to do that for the entire casket as I did with what I had on the Britomart casket, so that you can watch the full casket grow together stitch by stitch. Okay, sorry, I had to sneeze again. Let's get to my last bits of haul, and those are related to caskets. I'm also going to be pretty wordy about this, so that's why I've left it to the end. You can turn me off if you don't want to listen to me on this topic. And those are two incredibly important books. I would say that these are the most important books to have been published on 17th century English embroidery since the reigning magnum opus in this area, which is the Met's masterpiece, Twixt Art and Nature, English Embroidery from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, 1580 through 1700. This book is long out of print, but there is an authorized and free PDF download available from Bard. I'll link it in the description as long as it's still available. And if you don't own this, please do yourself a favor and download the book while it is available, because masterpiece. And as you can see from my million notes, bits of paper, and post-it notes sticking out from it, it's an essential reference guide, not just for eye candy and information, but for inspiration, whether you ever want to stitch anything like this or not. So let's start with the first of my two majorly important book acquisitions, and the first is the much discussed new Whitney Antiques catalog, Choice and Precious Work, Treasures from the Schoolroom, 1650-1750, Elizabeth Hall and Friends. Wow. So I've discussed before here in the context of casket stitching is the way it deviates from samplers. The makers get lost. There was no tradition in casket stitching, unlike sampler making, of stitching your name on your work or otherwise signing it or marking it in a way that your name would survive with your piece. That's why I have made so sure to make sure that my name is stitched or glued on to my own major finishes. I know what has happened to the girls who originally stitched 17th century caskets. We have no idea who they are, unlike the sampler makers. So caskets that have survived with the name of the girl who stitched them attached to them are unicorn objects. There are only a handful, and even rarer than that is where the entire needlework education has survived intact together. Not just the casket, but the sampler, the ancillary casket toys, any beadwork. So there's the Martha Edlin suite, there's the Anna Downs suite, both in the collection of the Victoria and Albert. I talk about Martha Edlin a lot because I'm really into her. And then now there is Elizabeth Hall. And as much as I love Martha Edlin as the OG of the genre, Elizabeth Hall might just have taken over as top contender because of the condition of her pieces. They are extraordinary. They have a few really interesting features about them. One is the condition. It's like we're in a time warp back to 1760, having looked at more 17th century English embroidery than I can count. It is rarer than I can tell you for things to survive in this kind of condition. The spectacular condition examples that exist tend to be in major museum collections like the Met. For there to be this entire collection in this kind of condition lurking out there with a name attached to it is nothing short of miraculous. So that's one extraordinary thing. Exhibit A, her casket. They're silk wrapped cards and they're not damaged. The only damage I saw was that there's a little pulling on the front around the hardware. Okay, so I've done some work with untwisted filament silk myself, and if you lay it instead of stitching it, so even like if it's in a long satin stitch, it snags when you look at it. There's a little bit of understitching with this technique on my Britomart casket. It didn't even survive the stitching of that panel before it started getting all snagged. I put something over it so you couldn't see it. That the casket still looks like this in the year 2023 is nothing short of a miracle, and it's emblematic of the entire condition of this suite. It's crazy. It's totally unbelievably crazy nuts. I mean, look at this. That's usually the kind of color you only find on the back of a piece from this century, not the front, and all of it looks like this. It was like Elizabeth Hall knew that this was incredibly important historic work. She wrapped it up in acid-free archival tissue paper, put it in museum storage conditions, and then waited for it to be discovered in the year 2023. I mean, I know I sound like a nut right now, but like that's how extraordinary the condition is on these pieces. Has a few other really interesting qualities too, which is the range of objects. You almost never see that. And uniquely among the surviving suites, really extensive use of metal thread. Ooh, you never see that in schoolgirl embroidery from England. I mean, there's some. It's just usually not this extensive because these are schoolgirls, they're learning, metal thread was crazy expensive. You almost never saw schoolgirls from this period put that much money into their materials. They usually heavily invested their time, but you almost never saw this much metal thread. Elizabeth Hall was a girl after my own heart. She liked colors, she liked sparkle, she set a high value on her needlework. Go Elizabeth Hall, you rock. I mean, this book is incredible because of the collection. These pieces are tied together. This is a collection that I really can't overstate the importance of. It has scope, it has breadth, it has depth, it has condition, it has provenance, it has everything. And this book is the record of this truly unique collection that, it breaks my heart to say, may disperse or disappear from public view unless a museum raises the money, does the far-ranging thing, and buys this so it can stay together and stay for the benefit of the public. This is going to be all we have. So I can't recommend this book highly enough, whether or not you ever think you want to stitch something like this. This is, oh my God, this is going to be one of the seminal publications on this period because it's such an extraordinary group of objects. I really can't say enough of it. And I did talk to somebody who had the chance to actually see the pieces before the exhibition went on display, and she confirmed that the photos are completely accurate. I mean, I would never accuse Whitney Antiques of manipulating conditions, but basically she said they looked like they were new and that it was just breathtaking in person. The condition of the objects is truly extraordinary. And this is also excitingly book 1 of 2, so there's going to be a complimentary exhibition next year with an exhibition publication. I can't wait to see what's in that. That should be fascinating if this book is any indication. So Choice and Precious Work is being carried by any number of needlework stores, The Attic, Needle and A-Stack, Traditional Stitches, Thistle Threads, and seriously, get the book because these super important publications become inspiration troves. You know, my Twig Start in Nature is going to end up totally dog-eared before the end of my life because I'm always revisiting it and finding new things in it. And I can tell you right now that Elizabeth Hall is going to join it. It gave me some ideas of some things I'd like to stitch myself after just a brief first pass through it. I haven't even really managed to get in depth cover to cover on it yet. And then that leads me to the other book that I bought. Man, 2023 has been an absolute banner year for publications in this area. So, oh boy, gotta get a workout here. So this is a book that was released some months ago, and I have been watching it for a while because the price was really high. The list price is $300. It's a 2-volume hardback set. You're gonna understand why it's $300 when I show you this thing. But I have been umming and ahhing, all like, I know I need it, but $300, you know how much that could buy. And then last week, a miracle happened. Oh. Logged on to Amazon to order, I don't know, toothpaste or something, and saw that the price on this had dropped hugely and that they were also having an extra 20% off coupon. So when you applied the coupon, that brought the pre-tax price down to $135 from $300. So, oh boy, I swooped it right there. And that is the 2-volume. Oh God, this thing is a brick. But look at that. The Percival D. Griffiths collection. Volume 1 is on his furniture collection, which I'm sure is fascinating, but I haven't cracked it yet because my interest is really in Volume 2. And that is his collection of English needleworks, 1600 to 1740. I didn't didn't know anything about Percival Griffiths until this book was published, and that is really quite remarkable because, as I found out after taking a first pass through this book, Percival Griffiths is the OG of collecting in this area. So OG, this came up on Saltbox Stitcher a few weeks ago, but it means original gangster, and it's so hard to define slang terms. So it means that you're one of the big players, that you're still relevant, but that you were in the game early. And by that definition, Percival Griffiths is the defining OG of collecting in this area. He was active roughly 1910 to 1930. He had to disperse his collection in the 1930s due to the global economic depression and the aftershocks of the 1929 crash. But before then, he assembled a collection unrivaled in breadth and scope. Really amazing. He, according to this book, basically set the market in this area, and I'd never even heard his name. I knew all about Erwin Untermeyer, who was from the second generation of collectors in this area. He donated a huge percentage of the Met's collection to the Met. What I never knew is that astonishing percentage of the objects in this book were originally from the collection of Percival Griffiths. Either Untermeyer bought them from Griffiths in the 1930s, or some of them were actually acquired directly by the Met in a trade with Griffiths. However, his name doesn't appear in Twigstar Nature. If it does, I missed it, because I know all about Untermeyer, but I hadn't heard about Griffiths. It's really interesting. Anyways, what makes this book so extraordinary is that Griffiths had this crazy collection. But he had this crazy collection 100 years ago, and then it was dispersed. It has flown all over the world into different museum collections, into private collectors. Some of it has disappeared entirely from view, and a lot of his records got dispersed with the collection as well. So these two dudes went on an international detective hunt to recreate his collection, to try and trace everything that he had owned, because he was the collector in this area. And what's even crazier is that they did it. They were able to establish a comprehensive record of the needlework and the furniture that were collected by Percival Griffiths. And some of the photographs are quite old. They weren't able to find current photographs for everything. I mean, this is one where they have, obviously, but some are old black and white photographs from his own records or from country life. His home was featured in contemporary publications, so you see a mixture of old and new photographs that they've traced. You know, what did he own? What happened to it after he owned it? How did it get dispersed? As a piece of detective work, it's amazing. As the record of one of the most extraordinary needlework collections to have ever existed, it is something that is truly unique, and it's a huge contribution to the history of this area. So as an artist and a stitcher, I am most interested in the objects themselves. Their design, their techniques. I love looking at them most of all, but that doesn't mean that some of the context around that isn't interesting to me too. And the story of how these pieces made it in to museum collections around the world is also a really fascinating one. So in that sense, I would say that while this is a hugely important book, it is very much a specialist book. This is for somebody who is very dedicated to the history of 17th century English schoolgirl embroidery. It's not something that everybody needs to own, but if this is your area, and if this is the kind of thing that appeals to you, you need to own this book. So I might be speaking to like 2 people out there watching this, but if you find out about it and you get to take advantage of the Amazon deal because you watched Flosstube, then it was totally worth chewing everybody's ears off for it. I would not say that distinction applies to Choice and Precious work. Everybody needs to own this one, but the Percival Griffiths book is highly specialized. It's fascinating, but it is highly specialized. So I'm thrilled that I got a great deal on it and I added it to my collection. Like I said, hugely important book, as is Choice and Precious work. I think in 10 years, we look back, the 3 most important books on 17th century English needlework are going to be Twixt Art and Nature, Choice and Precious work, and the Percival D. Griffiths collection. So as somebody who is a specialist in this area, I gotta own them all, and I'm thrilled that I do, but that would be my breakdown of what your interest in the books might be. Because for me, these books are going to enrich my own work, because Twixt Art and Nature has been essential reference work for me as I design and stitch and embroider and look for inspiration and reference, and I know these 2 are super gonna add to it. So I'm really excited. I did want to share that with you just because these are, I mean, like I said, really important books. I know I'm repeating myself and that means I should move on. Anyways, so the book nerd in me has just been an absolute hog heaven. Nothing like this has happened since Twixt Art and Nature, and then I got 2 in 1 week. It just exploded my little head. So that brings me to the end of this episode. If you sat through all my blah 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 on the books, oh, you are a super fan and kudos to you. But for next time, the content will be decidedly lighter in nature because we're going to be having a holiday stitching celebration. We'll be looking at my current holiday stitching as well as what I hope to work on. I'm gonna have a little chart parade of the things I hope to get to this year, because when it comes to cross stitch and seasonal stitching, Christmas is my season. My decorations are gonna go up on December 1st, so I will be fully decorated with bells on by the next time I see you. And then before my next Flosstube, I will have the tutorial up on my silk craft purl edging, and then when that goes up, the finishing packs featuring that fabulous green will be up on my website as well, so please look for that if you're interested. I'll see you again in 2 weeks for an absolute holiday extravaganza, and until then, happy stitching.